Hello everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. It's Wednesday the 28th of July and it's just about 5:30. This is a remote meeting and I would like to thank all the officers and members for agreeing to have this as a remote meeting. We don't have any apologies, but we do have a brand new member of our happy band. And so I would just like to welcome Councillor David Carr. He is our new permanent member. I hope you'll find it interesting. It's an interesting first meeting for you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Michael. Yes, it's a pleasure and a privilege to join you. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, are there any declarations of interest that have not been previously raised on the register of interests relevant to this evening's meeting? And I've got Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fisher.
I should just report that I'm an unpaid 0 hours contracted employer for a company that received a COVID business grant from the council, which is mentioned in the account. So transparency, I should mention that, I think.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any others? No. So before we get into the agenda, we have got a packed meeting this evening. We have a number of officers present, some that are already on the screen and some that will be joining us when the relevant agenda item comes up. I will ask each of the officers that when they first get called to speak, if they would just introduce themselves and give their job title, that would be incredibly helpful. So agenda item 2 are the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of June. Are there any points? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the minutes on page 3 of our agenda pack. Second paragraph on that page, it says, it was also confirmed that no budget has been set for the delivery of the action plan at this stage, but the finance were considering a funding package. I was wondering if we could get an update on that now, please. And then at the bottom of that very same page, point 2, dotty 2 says, we were talking about the LGA essentially being contacted, and I know we did receive an email, but again, sort of just an update on that. And then the final point for me on page 5, in relation to KCR 2, I believe we asked that the public interest report be sort of directly added to that, and it does say, but agreed to include reference to the PIR for further narrative against the risk. And I was wondering if I could have an update as to whether that's been completed or not.
Marvellous, fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Webb. We are going to be covering progress on the action plan, but I would just call on, firstly, Debbie Mitchell, who's our Chief Finance Officer, in respect to the first point you made, which is the budget. Has there been a budget allocated to the work on the action plan for the PIR?
Thank you, Chair. No, not yet. That's still on my actions to-do list. I'm afraid I haven't had a chance to complete that yet, but I will be looking at that imminently. And I can also just answer on the key corporate risks point as well while I'm on, is just that, yeah, we'll be incorporating that into the next review that you get on the key corporate risks. Fantastic,
that's great. And I know that when we get to the agenda item, little point 2, the external peer to be brought in, I think that will take part of our discussions. So if it doesn't get raised, Councillor Webb, and I can't see any context in which it wouldn't be raised, but do flag it up at that stage. Is that okay? Marvellous. I also have a correction of the minutes on page 7, first paragraph. the council's, it should say Tecal companies rather than Teacup. Enjoyable though Teacup leaving them in the minutes will be, I think for accuracy we do need to call it a Tecal company. If there aren't any other corrections to the minutes, with your approval, we will take those as once corrected, correct and accurate, and I will sign those physically when we have our next meeting, which will be in September and which will be a physical meeting. So agenda item 3 is public participation. As you know, we and all committees welcome public speaking, and we have 3 speakers this evening. The first of our speakers is Gwen Swinburne, who wishes to speak on matters relevant to this evening's agenda. Gwen, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, yes, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Yes, you are a long-standing public participant, so you know the score. You have 3 minutes. I will give you a warning when it's coming up towards time to wind up, if you haven't already finished by that stage. So please start whenever you would like to.
Thank you, Chair. Having had no independent person for over 2 years, the Director of Governance finally advertised with frankly outrageous constraints for a temp. Why not co-opt excellent Mr. Mendes? This committee is audit and governance, yet only finance applicants were invited. Considering the national embarrassment that our governance has become, why has the Director of Governance excused her own service area from independent oversight? Chair, at your last meeting, we witnessed the lengths to which the statutory officer went to avoid recommended external oversight of the PIR action plan, the one you were told you were not allowed to change. So the auditors and you demand external oversight, yet she won't agree. Makes one wonder who is in charge. That episode alone evidences what is so deeply wrong at the Council. First evidenced in the LGA peer reviews of 2013, 14 and 16, and the now buried appalling 97-page ICO data audit. These are the same people who have steadfastly ignored key actions from the last public interest report, having told you otherwise. Ask your colleagues how many have received written advice and training on their roles as directors of CYC businesses, the defining action required of the last public interest report. The fact every statutory officer, internal and external auditors did not see the last plan through is evidence enough that none of them can be trusted to see this action plan through, such as it is. Sadly, these and many other incidents highlight systemic failures in the governance in York, in Floyd's directorate mainly, significantly worsening over the last 2 years. Unlike finance with SIPFA required protocols, governance has few external controls or codes. This has allowed York's governance in the wrong hands to become like the Wild West. External auditors and internal have few skills, competencies or powers re governance matters. Shockingly, no one has. Sadly, as you all know, governance is not regulated like finance, and until it is, there are few realistic options, as the current management created this culture and climate. They create the problems and block solutions. Finally, you are in a difficult place until the top management is held to account for this almighty mess. You can start by treating the annual governance statement as the guiding strategy to address governance challenges, not the usual cut and paste annex to the accounts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms Swinburne. I'm sure a number of these issues that you've raised will be covered in the agenda this evening. Our second speaker is Mr Andy Mendes, the aforementioned Mr Mendes. Can you hear me, Andy?
Can, Michael.
Marvellous, marvellous. Well, start whenever you'd like.
Because I hope that you are feeling better. I know you've been off.
Yeah, I think that would be overstating it, but thank you very much.
Okay. Granny and I have not, it's not exactly a double act, but you will notice some similarities. Anyway, so here I go. Hello. And first I would like publicly to apologise to Mark Kirkham and Mazars for suggesting at the last meeting that the PIR was instigated solely by Gwen Swinburne's objection to the accounts. I was wrong, and I would like to make it clear that my error was purely one of ignorance. This is an opportunity for me correctly to thank Mazars for their vigilance. So, next point. I read the minutes of the 16th of June meeting with some alarm. Having listened to the debate about the PIR follow-up, I thought as a committee you were clear that an external involvement in the implementation of the action plan was required. And to be absolutely clear, in my view, this will be an ineffective and unnecessary follow-up circus, which will cost ratepayers a lot of money simply to get the council off the hook of the PIR. But that aside, I was shocked to see the interpretation in the minutes, which said, the committee requested that officers explore the possibility of an external peer be brought in to review the progress of the action plan. Now, unless things have changed a lot, officers are there to provide support to elected councillors who are there to set agendas and make decisions. This doesn't seem right. Now I read that the LJ has been invited to support COIC in the implementation. So, councillors, you should be grateful in a suitably humble way for that. Next point, I apologise for sounding like a broken record, but I would note that again, the agreed annual settlement agreement report is again missing from the work plan published in this agenda. I have no idea why. And finally, I note that my self-appointed term as a shadow independent member is coming to an end, assuming that COIC is able to appoint for up to 1 year only a single qualified accountant or auditor to replace me on A. Good luck with that if you can find someone appropriate. You will need a bit of luck, I think. I'm still not clear about how the G is to be handled in this replacement. I have expressed my frustration at the process and suggested that 2 members appointed for a decent term, perhaps 4 or even 5 years, and with perhaps an option of 1 renewal, might give you better support. But this has apparently fallen on deaf ears. So, as we say in all the best things, over and out. Cheers, Michael.
Thank you very much, Andy. And again, I suspect we will be touching on a number of these of the points you've raised within the agenda that we've got this afternoon. But I hope you will continue to watch the meeting, which I forgot to mention to Gwen Swinburne. And our final speaker is Councillor Claire Douglas. Claire, are you available? And can you hear?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely brilliantly, yes, thank you.
Great, thanks.
So, please make a start whenever you'd like.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly support the adoption of the LG Model Code of Conduct as part of the Public Interest Report Action Plan. I remain very troubled at the reasons why the adoption of this code has appeared as part of the action plan. We end up where we are because it is claimed the leader of our council, Councillor Aston, didn't understand or know that he was supposed and expected to declare a prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest during decision making. I simply don't accept that any of us, the elected representatives at this meeting, don't think about this constantly during our decision making and understand what is expected of us, especially if we've served almost 20 years on this council. The City of York Council Code it replaces was not a lacking code and was clear on what behaviours were expected and not expected of elected councillors. It was clear what the public could expect of us. The fact that adoption of this code now forms part of the action plan resulting from the public interest report has resulted in the decision to employ external governance experts to advise on its implementation. When the cost of this advice at £7,900 plus expenses is added to the substantial, potentially unlawful payments of £117,000 following the early exit of the previous chief executive, and the additional audit investigation costs of £28,000, we stand at £152,900 of York Council taxpayers' money down the drain. This is unacceptable at any point in time, but sticks in the throat even more when at least 20 City of York Council employees are on the notice of redundancy. And what does the public of York think of this? I hope the Lib Dem Green administration has been listening. Businesses, residents, partners and stakeholders all have opinions, and they aren't good. It's been said to me that people absolutely can't understand how the leader still has his job, that if this incident had happened in any other workplace, he wouldn't have kept his job. It pains me to say this smacks of the behaviour prevalent in current politics. One rule for the decision makers and another for everyone else. The public is not happy, and I couldn't agree with them more. As a past monitoring officer said to the Joint Standards Committee on a number of occasions, the final decision maker on councillors' behaviour and fitness for office is the public through the ballot box. The people of York deserve so much more, and sooner the public get an opportunity to cast their votes on this matter, the better. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And just to reiterate, I'm sure we will cover a number of these points later on in this afternoon's meeting or this evening's meeting. Please, you will now all leave the virtual meeting, but by all means continue to watch on the YouTube channel. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 4, which is the report of the Director of Governance, and it's the Corporate Governance Report. I will now hand over to Janie Berry, who will be presenting this report. Janie, would you like to introduce yourself and your role, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Janie Berry. I'm the Director of Governance for the Council and the Council's Monitoring Officer. This report has been prepared by my colleagues who are in the Corporate Governance team who are present this evening, Lorraine Lunt and Kath Murray, and it provides a regular overview of the various functions such as LGSO issues, FOI update, disclosure log, and also an update on RIPA, which is the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act activity which the Council undertakes. We're required to report that update on a quarterly basis. So if I may, Chair, hand over to Lorraine and Kath, because they will be able to provide much more detail and oversight into the report that's been provided for you.
Thank you. Who wants to start?
I'll start, Councillor Pavlovic. Okay.
Could you introduce yourself, Lorraine? Thank you.
I will do. Good evening, Chair and committee members. My name is Lorraine Lunt. I'm the Council's Information Governance and Feedback Manager, also the Council's Data Protection Officer. My report this evening covers, as Janie's listed, the regular topics of the information governance and complaints performance, a separate annex which gives you a list of future reporting options to consider and provide feedback and comments on for future reports to yourselves, the published Information Commissioner's Office decision notice with the addition of the unpublished decision notices and cases that we get through from the Information Commissioner Office, the local government Government and Social Care Ombudsman cases from the date of the last report to committee, and the details and the summary, the actions and the remedies from those cases. Progress and updates on the questions and comments that you raised last committee on the disclosure log, and as Janie mentioned, an update on where we are and what we plan to do next going forward with the action and improvement plan for RIPA. Going on to the performance, you will see at Annex 1 the performance figures for this preceding quarter, so April to June 2021. You will see that there's the addition of the performance figures of in time, etc., for what is now the new corporate complaints 4Cs process, which we implemented in April 2021. It also includes in detail the adults and children's social care complaints figures. Internally, we have reconfigured our 4Cs recording processes, and as set out in Annex 2, the list of future reporting options and types and headers for you to consider. Going on to the ICO decision notices. And just, sorry, before I move on from that, I did, and Robert Flintoff very kindly sent through a correction to the link that's in the published papers. I will circulate that for the public and in the necessary way. It's onto the York Open Data Platform, which details all the FOIs, EIRs and subject access requests, performance, in time and out of time figures going back to 2014, 2015. And those are able to be downloaded either as a spreadsheet and or a downloadable CSV file, etc., and a search function. So apologies that it was the incorrect, not up-to-date link that was in your initial report, but the correction was sent round, and I will make sure it's the correct one made available to the public as well. Moving on to the ICO decision notices, since last report to committee, there has been one published ICO decision notice where they found that the council had correctly withheld the information requested, but that we had not replied within the relevant 20-day timescale. And then from previous committee discussions, I've also now provided in the table the 4 other ICO instructions within this reporting time period, and that what the outcome of those were and that we've responded to them. So that's the table with the 4 instructions on there. So 3 were to respond and 1 was not upheld. Moving on to the LG SCO Ombudsman cases, and just to let you know, if you haven't already been made aware or seen it, the Ombudsman today published their annual letters for all councils and their performance figures. We will be providing a more detailed and in-depth analysis and findings from that annual letter and report, but to just beg committee's indulgence, I can give you a really quick summary. A very positive finding from the LGSCO performance figures this year is that we've had a drop from 75% to 63% of cases where the LGO found in favour of the complainant, so found against the council. So that drop of around about 12% is a real positive and shows, I hope, that the ongoing improvements made by the team and the council in its handling, responding to and learning from complaints. However, there will be, as I say, a more detailed and in-depth report to both the annual complaints report and through to this committee. The cases from the LGSCO are set out in Annex 4 with the actions that we're required to take and the remedies in the far right columns. We've also shown in that report, in that annex, where we have complied with those and when those have been in time or not. At the last committee, you asked us to consider how we got better access and information on the council's website of the different regulator decisions. And I'm continuing to work with our business intelligence and web services team on how best to do that and make sure that it's always the most up-to-date and accurate information, that the links are there. So the options there at 5.2 was that we would look to provide more direct links to where they can be found on the relevant regulators' website and how to best search on those websites to find the information that you may be looking for. Moving on to the disclosure log. So this is the information that the council is required to publish on FOI and EIR requests received, and when we've responded to them, we make that available on the council's website, and we have now amended it to show the last 12 months rather than the previous 3. It makes sure that we comply with other regulations such as the accessibility regulations, and also that they're to remind committee that there's no set timescale in the legislation on how long to keep a disclosure log. However, what I've been doing is searching on other council websites and asking colleagues in information governance networks how long they keep it. And it does seem to appear the average is around the 12 months to 18 months period, because very often information supplied as an FOI can be updated, amended or changed. I will be bringing a future report on the use of and the feedback from the current disclosure log to this committee in my next report. This was due to be in September, but again, apologies, there's a missing word at 6.5. I think that is now planned for my next report comes in October. Moving on to RIPA. As we've previously reported to committee, we are reviewing and updating the policies and procedures to ensure that we are fully compliant and have effective and efficient processes in place for managing RIPA applications and authorisations, CHIS applications and authorisations, the use of other directed surveillance and use of social media in any investigations. We have completed the training to the relevant council staff who are involved in making applications and or authorising such applications. We have been informed by the IPCO, so that's the Investigatory Powers Commissioner, that they will be carrying out their next programmed inspection of the council. This is booked in for the end of August. Their last inspection was by way of a questionnaire in December 2018. What we'll look at from any recommendations made from there is adding to our current improvement action plan for RIPA and report on the findings and recommendations back to this committee. We'll also be looking at how to involve audit and governance in ensuring that the policy and procedures going forward for RIPA is fit for purpose, and looking at any relevant training and or other requirements we need to provide to the committee to be ensured that they can fulfil that fit for purpose role. Moving on to just my last comments around what we were looking for members to support is to note the details in this report and to provide with feedback either now or by outside of the meeting, any feedback on the options for future reporting Annex 2.
Lovely, thank you very much. Kath, did you have anything to add, or are you just happy to respond to questions from members?
Yeah, just happy to respond. Yeah.
Thank you, Kath. Right, I shall open it to questions from committee. Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Fisher just needs to nip out of the meeting for a couple of minutes. Right, so please raise your hand. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Lorraine, Kath, thanks very much for this. And I'll just say here and now, it's quite nice to see at 5.1 at the last committee, you asked if we could do this, and boom, you're looking at it and you're getting on with things. That's a really positive thing. I suppose my question would be at 3.3 in your report. The ICO found that the council had correctly withheld information. However, we had not replied in the 20-day timescale. And then actually on the first page of Annex 1, percentage out of time for free information, and then basically the percentage out of time for the total of all complaints. I mean, at the total of all complaints, it's 41.9%. So nearly half of all complaints, and I know it's an average, we weren't responding within time. And I suppose my question is, why? Is there a reason? I don't really mind whether this is good compared to other people or bad compared to other people. It's more about what are the reasons that we're not getting this done in time.
So to answer some of those points, Councillor Webb, it has been, and I think we're starting to feel more of an impact on resource at this point of COVID-19 recovery and coming out the other side of the different lockdowns and resource impacts that has had within the service areas across the council. It's not an issue of people choosing or looking at how not to respond. It is purely down to the nature, and usually it's the more complex FOIs that include a lot of searches and a lot of retrieval of information from our different systems across the council to then go through and look at what can be and what can't be disclosed as part of the FOI or EIR request. So it is usually down to the complexity of the information being requested, the amount of information that is then retrieved and has to be gone through to ensure that we comply with what we can and can't disclose. There are various actions that we do take when we start to see a dip in time performance. That means going round various senior management team meetings, meeting more regularly with directorate management teams, pushing out more awareness and updates and refresher information, and looking at putting in potentially an extra reminder or chase stage in the process of compiling your response to ensure we start to catch those ones at an earlier stage, so that those that are at risk of going out of time, we can take more steps before they do.
Sorry, have you got a supplementary? I've got a supplementary. Can I go first?
No. I mean, you're chair. You can do what you want.
Sorry, excuse me.
Go on, chair.
So in respect of that, Lorraine, what would be handy, and I'm having to cast my mind back to previous committees, is this 41.9% figure strikes me as being not massively dissimilar to where we were pre-pandemic, and it would be useful to have a comparator on the forms for where we are on an annual basis. But two, is my recollection correct that we regularly raise with you the high percentage of out of time FOI responses, and can I just add to that? You mentioned the complexity of the actual FOI and the cases. 46.8% of level 1 cases in that second table seem to be out of time, and that's in the complaints. So I'm just wondering if you could just give us a bit of a historical overview and just some clarity on the complexity of the cases.
Okay, so going on to the historical and previous out of time percentages, this is the lowest it's been for quite a considerable time. Right. We have usually managed to maintain what the ICO would recommend as a target of at least 85% of responses being in time. So, however, that dip in performance over both FOIs and EIRs of in time has only been recently. We were doing and managing to maintain that level of in-time performance for a number of quarters. Part of, and yes, I absolutely agree, you have asked previously for comparator information, and part of what we're working with business intelligence in doing on that information that's presented to you as just a list in Annex 2 will be to provide you with a quarter-on-quarter comparator with the option of putting it in as a trend line or a theme line and or both, etc. So that comparator quarter on quarter is there. If you do want to see that comparator data, it is on the link to the York Open Data Platform. You can go onto that and pull up, as I say, going back to 2014 and 15, the performance figures. I know that's not in an easy to access format for your report to this committee, so that's why I'm working with business intelligence on how best to present all of that information. You have already told me and fed back to me that you would like to see in future performance reports. So absolutely, that should be there and will be there in the next information from your feedback from the options in Annex 2. The percentage of out of time of complaints, again, it may be just from the introduction of the new 4Cs, that changing over and handover of managing within the different policies and procedures. We are keeping a close eye on it and hope to see that slowly improve over the next reporting quarters in this reporting cycle. But as always, we will continue to work with all the different management teams, corporate directors, on identifying where we are having potential sticking points or lack of responses in time. For example, we are working closely with adult social care only just this week on identifying where we can look at identifying additional capacity within their already stretched business as usual provision to ensure that we bring down that out of time response rate for especially adult social care, and how that will also then impact on their complaints that are dealt with through the level 1 corporate process. So absolutely, it's a disappointing figure to see it around that 46.8% figure again. However, we will continue to work and report robustly and openly to committee on reasons for that. Kath, have you anything to add on the complaint side?
Yeah, I would just, the other piece that I would want to add in there is exactly as Lorraine says, you know, it is something that we do want to keep an eye on and look at improving. One of the things though that I've been really quite keen on is, you'll have seen in previous annual reports that there was a fairly high percentage of some corporate complaints that were getting no response at all. And so whilst we're a little bit delayed in responding to some of the complaints, what we are very keen on making sure doesn't happen is that there are any complaints that get no response at all. So we may have some that kind of go a little bit out of time, but we will keep complainants up to date with that, keep them advised about new timescales, and hopefully, you know, won't come through in the sort of quarterly reports. But as we've been in, you know, dealing with this over time, you'll see that there are no complaints in corporate services that don't get a response at all.
That's a relief. Okay, now, Councillor Webb, you had your supplementary, which I stole off you.
Well, no, I mean, you did ask most of what I was going to ask, but on that last point, Kath, this was my other part. I was going to ask, actually, when it says percentage out of time, does that literally mean someone made a complaint and then within the statutory time period they had no response from the council whatsoever? Or does it mean the response from the council was, we're aware of it, we're trying to deal with it, it might take a little bit longer? Could you just, because I think that's quite important, actually. I think if I think getting that clear would be really useful.
It means they haven't had their final response. So right. we would still have been looking at keeping people up to date and liaising with them. But so in terms of the corporate and the statutory, we have the timescales that are set in there, and we will record whether they're in time or out of time based on whether they get a final response to the complaint, answering all of the points by that timescale. So it doesn't include where we've kept people up to date on those things.
So when you say that they've had no response at all, it doesn't mean that their complaint was completely ignored.
Well, that's in terms of previous responses, previous reports where we've said no response sent. What that has meant is that we haven't had sight of a response. So
Right.
it will be logged as being out of time, and our assumption has been that there hasn't been a response sent. There may have been a response sent, and sometimes there has, but we haven't been sent a copy. The only time we would really know that is if a complainant comes back to us and tells us, no, we haven't had a response. What we try to do in the majority of those cases is contact, or had been doing, was contact the complainant for the corporate side and say, we understand you should have had a complaint response now. We hope you're satisfied with it, but if you're not, please let us know. But unless somebody came back to us, we wouldn't always know whether a response had been sent. We would chase managers at that point and ask them to send us the response, but if we didn't get it, we'll log it as no response sent. So that still happens for the statutory sides of the complaints procedure, but obviously on the corporate side now, all the responses come from us. So you may well see that they're out of time, but what I hope you will not see is any that say no response sent.
Great, well that's a relief.
So that's also, sorry, that's also the same for FOIs and SARS, where we are aware that we may go out of time. Requesters are either informed of that and when we are likely to be able to respond to them in full, and they will have also had the initial acknowledgement as well. So it's not that we ignore or don't reply.
Yeah. So just for clarity, will the 4 Cs process that was introduced in April mean that those statutory no responses can never happen? Because you know, this is the first I think we've been made aware that there was even a concept of that the council would potentially completely ignore a complainant, and you know, I cannot think of any context in which that will be appropriate for the authority. So will the 4 Cs be able to identify those?
So sorry, Kath. So just to clarify for that, where we've recorded that there's been no response sent, that is that there's been no final outcome of all the investigation sent, or we've been made aware of. The complainant, if it has come through our process and we've been made aware of it, will have had an acknowledgement. They will have had a potential contact with the corporate complaints team to understand the nature of the complaint that they're making and also the outcomes that they were looking for. So there would have been correspondence through that process. The bit around going forward in the 4 Cs and the statutory processes, we have all the security steps in both the statutory processes that the team manage and within the 4 Cs. And now, as Kath mentioned, that the 4 Cs are being, responses are being sent from the corporate governance team, complaints advisors, there will be a vast reduction, if not to zero, where there is no record or report of no response, no final response sent. That information has been shared through the annual complaints reports, and maybe what I'll take from this as well is that we will amend that reporting field to no final response sent, so that it's really clear what that means if there is ever any more of those.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. So
Kath, just on the so the statutory side of things, so the 4 Cs relate to the corporate complaints, so that excludes adult social care and children's social care. So those ones still have responses sent by the service areas, and what we've been doing, and we've got to make sure that we we give as much support as we can, obviously, to the managers and to the complainants to make sure that complaints are understood and get responses, whilst making sure that we adhere to the legislation. But what we've been doing in a number of cases is working with managers to look at them using us almost as a kind of board where we can have a look at, and we can have a look at those responses for them to make sure it answers everything clearly. We do all the reminders and those kind of things. And in a number of cases as well, what we will do when we have got all the information back is we'll help people start and put a draft together, because sometimes, you know, without putting too fine a point on it, it's difficult to make the start on actually getting that response done. So we'll start and put something together for them with the information they've given us, so that they can then check that and add the detail to that to make sure a full response gets out. So that's the kind of work that we're doing with both adults and children's services at the moment. We're just starting to do a little bit more work with adults again, in terms of looking at who is around that is going to be able to take those investigations forward as comprehensively as possible.
No, that's really helpful. You know, but my concern, going back to something that you said earlier, was where you contact the relevant statutory adult or children's social care team, and they don't give you a response either. Now, you know, I think I'm going to turn this over to Janie, because that strikes me as being a wholly inappropriate way of one department treating another department. You are trying to coordinate complaints, and given that this is children and adult social care, you know, these may well be really significant issues that residents are bringing up. And if the only process we've got is logging that no response, no response sent, there's got to be a feedback scenario to the corporate director of that department to say that that's not happening. So I'm just going to ask Janie how she envisages this type of issue getting raised with the highest level of management.
So I already have quite regular dialogue with the corporate director of people, who's responsible for both children's and adults. And we are working closely with her to try and alleviate the pressure of frontline services so that we take on a much more corporate end-to-end response. It is small steps. She and I are absolutely on the same page in that we do need to make sure that there's a centralised response, that it's properly recorded, because the concerns in the People Directorate are very complex, very real, very serious, and cannot be ignored at all.
No.
So we're working with her. The 4 Cs has been a great introduction, I must admit, in terms of change of culture and change of mindset. Because previously, you'll be aware that we weren't offering an end-to-end service because we were not empowered to. So we would highlight the complaint that's coming in. It would then be dealt with by the services. And then, as my colleagues have explained, sometimes we would be told of the outcome and sometimes we wouldn't. So the change in culture that's been brought about by 4 Cs of the support of this committee is really, really helping. During the lockdown, we've also been piloting doing some end-to-end support as well within pockets of the People Directorate, and that is with both our support is going to be rolled out much more, because now we've managed to see the benefits of that. So we are working in the right direction, and we absolutely are. Both Amanda and I do have oversight as well as to the serious complaints, and also we've ensured that any concerns that Lorraine and Kath have are automatically raised directly with myself and Amanda, and that we take a personal role in addressing any concerns and meet with the staff or the team involved to try and rectify the problem once it's been brought formally to our attention. So we are doing as much as we possibly can at this moment in time. I've also asked as well, and Amanda has agreed to this very willingly, that Lorraine and Kath also have like an open access invite, if that makes sense, to any relevant DMT meeting that takes place. So we're not having meetings for meeting's sake, but we have a slot on the agenda of a relevant DMT meeting, so a department management team meeting, should we need it in order to raise some issues. And so we're doing as much as we can across that really big directorate at the moment, but the culture change that's been brought about by 4Cs is certainly helping in people understanding, and our staff are feeling, in the corporate governance team, are feeling a lot more empowered now. Their professional skill set is being used, and they're managing to respond a lot more appropriately and give very complex, quite high risk advice on occasions to the people directorate, and it's being very readily accepted, respected, and relied upon as well. So it's been a massive team effort. It's not just Amanda and I, but it's a massive team effort.
Well, as this is a work in progress, Janie, can I ask that at a subsequent meeting that somebody reports back as to how that process has gone, and what feedback that Lorraine and Kath have had when they have raised these issues of no response to complaints? That would be incredibly helpful. Lorraine.
Yeah, it's just to also give you another avenue of where you'll hopefully start to see improvement is we're just now starting to compile and draft what's called the annual complaints report. And you may not recall last year's, but I can cut and paste those bits out and send it to all committee members again after this meeting. That will show you that the trend on those lack of responses or lack of a final response in the different areas was actually starting to come down, and that was in last year's annual report. Hopefully when we do the analysis and the work to provide and draft this year's annual report, that'll continue to be showing that improvement. It certainly looks and feels as if it will be that again, but yes, I'll send that information out of last year's annual report, and you will get this forthcoming annual complaints report I think it's later on in this year, after it's gone to the relevant scrutiny committee first. So that'll also provide you some of that information you've been asking, you've raised. Yeah.
I would just like to clarify as well that when I was kind of talking about the no responses, it was predominantly in relation to the 4Cs and the corporate complaints as opposed to the statutory. I thought you were referring to the statutory complaints. No, there are some on the statutory, but very few on the statutory that don't have a response. So I do just want to put people's mind at
well, that's a relief, because I think 0 should be the target that we're aiming for. But are there any other questions on this agenda item? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6.4 about the timescale of the disclosure log. Now, I fully appreciate that it takes time, effort, money to put, the FOIs on the disclosure, and there's always the risk of them going out of date. But I have to say, as one who's been doing quite a bit of work on looking for submitting FOIs to other authorities, some of them have rather longer records than we do, and in some cases that's actually saved me the bother of putting an FOI in, because the information was actually there. So I'd be very interested to see what happens at 6.5, because I can see there are disadvantages in keeping a long disclosure log in terms of the financial cost, but there are advantages in making it easier for residents to find the information they need. So I say I'll look for that report in November with some considerable pleasure.
Yeah, and can I just also say, just to add to that, it is a huge improvement. We have been asking for disclosure log to be extended from 3 months for quite some little while. So to actually see it happening, as I think Councillor Webb also alluded to, in response to our concerns, I think is absolutely excellent. But yes, Lorraine, sorry, to Councillor Fisher's point.
So the work that is underway to understand the requirements of going back to publishing, because I think what the difference is publishing the disclosure log in the way that we do, and the way that the regulation requires us to do, and also the way some other local authorities and public authorities do. Other others may very well, as Councillor Fisher says and others have commented on, may actually produce and publish the actual full FOI response as well. Please bear in mind that those disclosure logs or publication of FOI responses are never the full list of FOIs an organisation will have received. The wording at the start of them will have said they will pick which ones to put out onto their disclosure log. So again, it's not always the full list that people expect it to be. We have to look at, we did used to publish those, but with the way that the upload onto the website did it, they were never in chronological order. We received numerous complaints both from councillors and members of the public suggesting changes, going to a list format, and over a period of months and potentially around about a year, what we did was looked at the best way and how we could comply, and we changed it alongside the requirement to have accessibility standards on our website, because our previous way of publishing a disclosure log had the FOI responses as a PDF, which is now no longer meets the accessibility standards. So there is still some more work for me to do with business intelligence team as well as the web services team. I also have to look at the resource and capacity issue within the team on looking at, because it is a very manual step process to look at and consider all the FOI responses and EIR responses that we do get into the team. As you'll see from the list, it's usually around about the 500 mark a quarter, and how and which ones need to go on a disclosure log, and then making sure that that's kept in a accessible way and uploaded in an accessible way. So absolutely, it's not the work continues, and I will give the another report in my next report to committee on where we are with that work. However, it may rely more on, we are looking at replacing the case management system by December the 31st this year. We are on quite an old version and either need to upgrade or replace it. And absolutely, in my spec and desires and wishes for that system is that we have a way of more automating publication of final responses when they are approved to be sent out. So lots of options and bits for me to look at over the next few months to be able to report back on what we are able to do going forward.
Thank you, Lorraine. And if you could, when you do present that to us, if you could give us what the barriers are, you know, is it purely a financial one, improving the data management system or the case recording system, and if you're working to an old system, and we would improve transparency within the authority with a newer case management system. If it is a resource issue, you know, you don't have to break down the figures. It would just be helpful to understand what the barriers to the introduction of that would be.
Okay.
Councillor Webb, you've got your finger in the air. I'm guessing you're not testing the wind.
No, I'm not sure we need a detailed answer now, but it's one to flag is, Lorraine, you mentioned earlier on about FOI requests being published and the fact that actually authorities sort of pick and choose. I assume that there is a set criteria by which the pick and mix of FOI requests happens. And again, in order to avoid questions of transparency and things like that, it might be worth flagging that somewhere, whether it's in a report in the future or as part of the website or something like that, because I think, yeah, getting that right would be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Cool.
I can set that out in more detail in the next report, but also I can look at whether we need to amend the wording on the disclosure log current website page to clarify that in a little bit better. Basically, most people will follow the ICO's decision-making criteria for what they publish and don't publish on their disclosure log. And it's usually the public interest ones, things that are up to date, etc. That's a very short, quick answer.
Thank you.
But yeah, issues in the public that pass the public interest test where they've used public money or spent public money.
That's useful. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. So in the absence of, oh gosh,
it's
Lorraine,
just
you're asking your own questions now.
I'm begging committees
no
dispensation to give you just a quick verbal update on something that only came to my attention after I'd sent my report for publication for tonight, and I know it was a question that was brought up previously at committee about passwords, and I do have a bit of an update. It's very, very quick. If I just read it, is that okay?
Yeah.
So this is come from Roy Grant, the head of ICT, and it's to provide an update, and we'll provide it by email after tonight. Changes to the password policy in the recent completion to test the new password management and security system called SpecOps. It's now in place, gives us much more flexibility and security of passwords. It allows us to use multiple password policies and also checks passwords against blacklisted and known vulnerable passwords on the dark web. With that extra functionality and in line with the updated guidance from the National Cyber Security Centre and NHS Digital, users will be encouraged to create longer passwords, which reduces the requirement to change them so frequently. This will help us to remember passwords, reduce the practice of writing passwords down, nobody does that, and greatly reduce the number of calls to the ICT service desk for forgotten password and account blockouts. The policy, therefore, will now be changed to your password, if it's 10 to 14 characters long, will be changed every 90 days, or you'll be forced to change every 90 days. Passwords of 15 characters or more, you'll be forced or required to change only every 365 days. These options allow staff and elected members and councillors to have either a 10 to 14 character password that could be triggered to be changed in the 90-day period, or create the longer 15 character passphrase password one. This will ensure more appropriate passwords are used, greatly increase the time for them to limit the time that it will be compromised, and hopefully ensure that we have the ability to not be breaching where we've written down passwords. So I'll circulate this by email to all committee members and through Democratic Services as the wording. But yeah, it was just a quick update to let you know that work's completed and it's now been changed. And you have the ability to choose between a shorter character change every 90 days and a longer set of characters, but you would only be forced to change every year.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was an issue that was raised in Mazars' report, unless I'm much mistaken.
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I knew I'd. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue that we pick up as part of the annual governance statement as well. So
yes,
it's an outstanding issue.
Yes,
so we can deal with that outside of this meeting.
Yes. Yes. Cool. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So I shall, with many thanks, and especially for the progress that's been made since the last meeting in actioning our recommendations. I know that we've got two options. We will note this report. We have asked you if you can bring some additional information to the next meeting, and we will thank you. And you can, I don't think there's anything else that's relevant to Kath and Lorraine. You're not going anywhere, Jenny. Sorry. But thank you very much, and we shall see you not in September but in October, because when we do the work plan, that there will be some shuffling about of agenda items. So we'll see you in October. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. So agenda item 5, it's the biggie. The draft statement of accounts 2020-2021, and I am going to hand over to Debbie and Emma, our fantastic finance people. Right, all yours.
Thank you. Chair. I think you all know who I am, but I'll just do introductions anyway. I'm Debbie Mitchell. I'm the Chief Finance Officer, and the report that we've brought before you is the draft 2021 Statement of Accounts, and it's here for you to review, to challenge, to scrutinise, and to note. We published the Statement of Accounts on the 14th of June, which was actually a good 6 weeks ahead of the statutory deadline of the 31st of July. You'll recall that normally it's the end of May, but due to COVID, the government have given extra time, but we decided to try and stick to our original timetable. So this also means that we have had the public inspection period that ran from the 14th of June to the 23rd of July. And again, we had a great number of queries, but all of which we were able to respond to and deal with. The other point I would make just before I open it for any questions is that it's not necessarily the role of A&G to check the accounts or identify any errors or mistakes or misstatements, because they are currently being audited by Mazars, and they will identify any issues, any misstatements, any errors, and they will be reporting back to you at your meeting at the end of September, just to assure you that you're not expected to pick anything like that up. I'm aware that you've had a brief training session with Emma earlier on this afternoon. And that's all I was going to say, Chair, by way of introduction.
Emma, did you want to add anything?
No, nothing else from me, just open for questions when you're all ready. Right,
before we go to questions, members, I don't know about all of you, but we've been at it for over an hour, and I suspect questions may take a little while. So can I suggest that we take a 10-minute, 5-minute? Does anybody have any opinions as to how long? Comfort break? 5. I've got 5. I've got 2 5s. Oh, 3 5s. God, that's almost a majority. Right, 5 minutes, which will bring us back at 22-ish. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. We just had a quick 5-minute break and had our introduction to the statement of accounts from Debbie, and I'm now just going to open it up for questions to members. Do we have any questions? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like either Debbie or Emma to just give us a little bit of further narrative on the valuation of properties, please. As a chartered surveyor myself, I'd be interested in how these are faring as far as the council is concerned, and what the reasons, I see there is a small reduction, and what the reasons they think might be behind that small reduction in valuation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So we've got a 5-year revaluation programme. Each year we value different things. So we do tend to see an increase each year in the property valuation on the balance sheet. It is the biggest number on the balance sheet, so it is something that Mazars do take a big interest in, and they work through all of the different valuation methods used by our valuers, check that we've applied them properly in the accounts. And just to summarise, so key things we've valued this year are car, cycle and coach parks, commercial properties, and also another biggie is Allerton Waste. So that's been valued by external valuers this year. That's something shared with North Yorkshire County Council. So we've got our share within PP figure on the balance sheet. So that's responsible for a lot of the movement this year.
Thank you. Sorry, did you have a supplementary there, Councillor Carr?
No, thanks, Chair. That was fine. Thank you.
So I think the page 58 of our minutes are relevant to the revaluation of the investment properties. Led to a decrease in their valuation of 1.379 million. Now, it states this is reflected in note 14 and in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. Now, on page in note 14, it basically is just a narrative. It just says it is reduced by this amount. It would be helpful if some additional context, such as the one that you've given us, could be added to just explain how that depreciation in value has come about. So if that could be added, either there in the note or in the narrative.
No, that's a good comment. I mean, it's good to get a fresh pair of eyes. So yeah, we can add something just to make it clearer of what sort of factors have fed into the decrease there.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now I've got Councillors Webb and then Councillor Fisher. Councillor Webb, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. My question's about reserves and all the varying kinds of reserves. On the top of our agenda pack, page 52, which is page 10 of the sort of narrative bit, there's a little table. So it talks about reserves, and in the first paragraph, we've got note brackets indicate a reduction in reserve. And actually, there's quite a few reserves that have grown over this year. And I suppose this links in detail to the accounts on page 67, where we've got essentially where the reserves are now, and then on page 68, where they were a year ago. I wondered if it firstly might be a little bit maybe helpful to include something pre-pandemic as well, to sort of show that trend over time, because I know that there is obviously talk in the narrative about some reserves being used in the pandemic, so it might be useful to have that sort of over an extra year or something, at least for the narrative. And I suppose something in there about how have we've gained reserves in a time when everything we've heard tonight and everything since has been about the fact that the council's under absolutely huge financial pressures. So I suppose it'd be interesting maybe to put something in there about why we've gained overall, or I know we've not gained overall, but why we've gained in some areas and lost in others. That'd be helpful. So maybe if you could explore reserves a little bit more, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. I mean, it's been an unusual year, hasn't it, for many different reasons, but the main one being the pandemic, and the impact that you see in the accounts is a lot of those reserves. It's to do with timing differences. So I think we've talked before about the accounts present a position. And it's somewhat artificial, isn't it? But a position as at the 31st of March. And, we don't live our lives in financial years. It's nothing different on the 1st of April to what was happening on the 31st of March. But we've kind of got to draw a line in the sand almost as at the 31st of March. So some of the reserve balances are due to timing differences. The government paid us a lot of their what are called Section 31 grants for various COVID-related matters. And due to the way the collection fund works, they carry forward in between different years. So some of it is around timing differences. But yeah, certainly Emma and I can go away and explore about how we can just be a bit clearer about usable versus non-usable reserves. So the general fund reserve, and again, you're right, it's masked because we include the amount that is held by schools, that is theirs and not ours. But yeah, certainly we can go away and think about how we can just, because the general reserve has gone down, as you know, we used $500,000 of that to balance last year's outturn. So yeah, I think we could do something a bit clearer on that in future within the narrative report, certainly.
Thank you. Now I've got Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether this is a question I could really better be putting to the Director of People if she was available, but it's on page 51. It's concerning the net expenditure and net budget for the Children Education and Communities Directorate with the £3.801 million overspend. Is this largely down to the pressures of supporting children in the home during COVID, or is it something that we're probably going to have to learn to live with as a result of possibly the sort of ongoing effects of the 2014 Children and Families Act? And the second question, which has the government made any specific budgetary provision to support local authorities in delivering those services, or has it just said, well, here is an act, pay for it?
So in answer to the first point, the overspend on children's services, is there are well, the main reason is the cost of placements. So we budget for around about 210 children and young people in care, and I think we've just been doing the Monitor 1 report for this year. Actually, I think we've got about 270, 280 children and young people in care. We've also, because of that increase in the children and young people, we've had to employ some agency staff because just of the volume of caseload. So there is a lot of work ongoing to manage that, which I won't talk about here because I don't know enough about the ins and outs clearly of children's social care. But we have articulated some of that in the outturn report, and we will be again in the monitoring report when that goes to executive next month in August. So it is an ongoing, some of that is directly related to the pandemic, some of that is an underlying budget pressure that you'll recall has been around since before the pandemic. And again, I know you all know this, but it's worth repeating, these are not issues that are unique to York. This is a national issue around the funding of both adult social care and the impact of children's social care, the SEND funding, and a whole range of other things.
Councillor Webb had a supplement. Yeah, I spotted you. Councillor Webb.
It's not necessarily supplementary, but more of an advertisement to maybe double the audience for the Children Education Community Scrutiny Committee.
We're not there to make your committee any more popular.
As vice chair of that one, we've got a commission slot in September to look at exactly that, Councillor Fisher, where we're going into the details. So yeah, it is being looked at.
Thank you. I shall watch that with considerable interest. Thank you.
And I've got a supplementary, not necessarily in relation to children's social care, but on page 50, second paragraph down, Debbie, as a sort of introductory context, the Council's medium-term financial strategy is set within a robust and well-established planning framework and is based on an analysis of the key influences of the financial position and an assessment of the main financial risks facing the Council. What have you learned over the last 12 months in particular that have maybe challenged some of the previous assumptions that you as accountants or financial planners might have made? And the reason I ask it, because hopefully a pandemic on the scale that we've seen is a once in a 100 years, but certainly once in a generation. But the potential for a significant downturn in the economy, a recession, might be something that we see more regularly. So how do issues like the ones that we've gone through over the last 12 months change the way you think and plan?
Well, I mean, the planning has been interesting, hasn't it? Just due to the level of uncertainty, and I hesitate to use the phrase, but I will, unprecedented level of uncertainty. I'll quote the Chancellor. It has been unprecedented. Ordinarily, we would be able to forecast our medium-term financial strategy over 2 or 3 years with some reasonable certainty that we were aiming for the right number. We've not been able to do that. We, at this point in time, still don't know whether we're going to get a comprehensive multi-year settlement type spending review in December, or whether we're going to get another 1 year. The government still hasn't said what they're doing about social care funding. We don't know what's happening about the fair funding review, the business rates reset. There are so many things that we don't know. So that has continued to be challenging. I think what it's reinforced to me is the need, whilst we have used a small amount, just $500,000 of the general reserve, it's reinforced to me the need to ensure that we do have adequate unallocated reserves, if you like, for rainy day money, for want of a better phrase. I think we've done really well to get to this point and only take $500,000 out of the general reserve. I think we're quite unusual in that. I think a lot of other councils have had to rely much more heavily on reserves. So I think that's where our previous kind of robust financial position and planning has served us well. So I think it's an endorsement of how we've done the finances, that we're still in a relatively good position, but the challenge is not over, not by any stretch of the imagination. These issues that we talked about and that Councillor Webb mentioned would be discussing at children's scrutiny, they're not issues that can be resolved quickly or easily. Yeah. But I think we've identified all the pressures. There's nothing that's come up that that we weren't aware of and didn't anticipate. And on a positive note, I think the thing that has been interesting is how quickly the economy, particularly the local economy, has recovered. So I think some of our assumptions around unemployment were pessimistic. The only other thing that I suppose that I would say is that the pandemic's potentially widened the divide, if you like, in terms of the haves and the have-nots. I think that that's possibly more starker than it was. Tend not to be in the middle, sort of either one or the other, I think now. So, and again, you're all aware of those issues around 0 hours contracts and the gig economy and all those kind of things. So I think that, has focused our attention on some of those areas around universal credit and benefits and ensuring that we've got proper support in place to support residents and families and children, free school meals, those kind of things. I think it's brought a lot of that into sharper focus, and the digital divide, I think, is the other issue as well, and where people have not had access to the technology to enable them to do things more remotely. But I think the big things, the things around social care, we've had a good grip on in terms of the pressures and what's going on there.
So the things that you've learned basically and the things that you've identified, do they get do they get codified, if you like, into a document, a set of underlying principles for Section 151 officers in York, or Deputy One, or the accountancy team, or the different finance heads across the different directorates?
I haven't done, but I can. Yeah, I'll give that some thought. I mean, certainly we know where we certainly learned a lot about how frail or otherwise some of our income streams are. So yeah, we've got a much better understanding of the risks. And previously, even if we've been doing sensitivity analysis, I, for example, would never in a million years have thought to say, well, I wonder what will happen if we don't get any car parking income for 3 months, because I would have thought it was ridiculous. But so yeah, we can push our sensitivity analysis a bit further to the extreme now, because we've experienced it. So yeah, we'll certainly look at how we do our sensitivity analysis. We probably wouldn't codify it in that way, because it's about an assessment of risk and a balance of risk. And clearly we can have all the information in the world and the best analysis in the world. We haven't got any more money, so we're still managing with what we've got.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Councillor Webb, I've got your hand up again.
Yeah, apologies.
No,
Chair,
nothing to apologise for.
I haven't heard what I've said yet, but no, I think that this is a slightly awkward point, but I feel like I've got to make it. On page 54 of our report, so sort of the third paragraph, second full paragraph down, you know, we've got in the middle of that, it says there's been an underspend of 400k on repairs and maintenance as a significant variant. Now, I get that this is literally the accounts. It's just stating where money is and where it's not, and where it's been spent and where it hasn't been spent. But then it does make me look at the previous page, again, sort of the second full paragraph down on page 53, where it says, at the bottom of that, the council is taking steps to, in response to a shift in demand, led expenditure pressures and reductions in grant funding, the council is taking steps to enable itself, residents and communities to work together as equal partners to meet their future needs and priorities. And I really do, that equal partners, I can't see how we can put that in there when we have tenants who are paying their rent and we're not effectively doing the repairs that are needed. I just feel like, I know it's a small point and it's one that I'm making, and you can decide to do what you want with it, but I really do think that we're not equal partners right now. And I'm not necessarily saying that's anyone here's fault, but we do have residents who are very much and have been let down by the fact that, you know, their houses haven't been repaired and the quality of the housing is not good enough. And I just don't feel that that's a fair statement to make in this context. So yeah, a bit of a whine, I know, but I thought it had to be made.
I mean, I can answer some of that. So, and I think it was in the Outturn report, but you know, part of the reason that we underspend on repairs and maintenance was, as you'll understand, for a significant period of the financial year, we weren't allowed to go into people's homes and do those repairs. But what we have done is carry forward that unspent balance, and there is a plan in place to deal with the backlog and catch up. I don't know the details of that, but you know, there is a plan in place, as I understand it, to deal with that backlog of repairs that were just simply because we could not go into people's homes to do those repairs. But I can get some more information on that from the service area if you'd like.
Yeah,
I've given one example there, but there are numerous examples
Right, okay.
where I think residents are being let down. I just feel that that's an unfair statement.
Yeah, I suppose a supplementary to that, Debbie, is every area, you know, and you make reference to it in page 50 in that paragraph that I quoted earlier towards the end. As part of the financial strategy, consideration is given to the likely savings required in future years, and services are actively working to develop plans which will change the way services are provided and deliver budget reductions in the future. It's about how does that financial modelling, that financial strategy, say on a ranking system, this area can warrant a cut, this area can't warrant a cut. How does that sort of thing work? I appreciate this may not be budget account stuff, but I think it's really interesting to know. Is everything just say you've got an across the board 15% top sliced off your budget, or how do you do it?
So there are a number of things we look at, because the budget is, and you probably heard me say this dozens of times before, but the budget is just your plan in financial terms. So the key document here is the council plan and the priorities that have been set out by the administration. So they are the priorities of the council, they are the objectives of the council, and the money should follow those objectives and priorities. Now that's easier said than done, I recognise that. But basically what as officers we would do is we would ask corporate directors, assistant directors to look at what they are doing, how they are doing it, the cost of it, and finance will support them to come up with some potential options to put forward to members that could be budget savings. As you know, you could put forward a number of different savings, and it's about priorities. So officers don't necessarily say do this saving or don't do that saving. They say here are the range of possible savings for executive, the administration, and ultimately full council to determine which one of those budget savings go forward. What there isn't any doubt about is that we will continue to need to make budget savings on an ongoing annual basis, certainly for the next 3 years, or until such time as there is some sort of longer term funding solution for adult social care, or something else happens. Given what we know now today, we will need savings next year, and we will need savings in the next 2 years after that. I haven't gone beyond those 3 years, quite honestly, because at this point I haven't really even got enough information to do next year, never mind the next 3 to 5 years, which is what we would ordinarily like to do. So if we do get a comprehensive spending review in December this year, which would be, and by comprehensive I mean a multi-year settlement, so that government give us some certainty over the next 3 years, at that point you can start to plan and you can start to factor in what pay awards there might be, what will be happening with pensions and the cost of pensions, what will be happening with inflation, a whole range of other factors, business rates, council tax, benefits. You know, I'm sure you can imagine the sort of things that we're taking into account to come up with what we think the potential growth is needed. So for pay award, other contractual price increases, etc. The cost of funding the capital programme is another item that we would make sure that we'd got enough in to do that we'd got enough in to have a contingency, that we'd maintained an appropriate level, an acceptable, safe level of reserves. And then that would leave, ordinarily for us, that will leave a gap, and that gap would have to be met by savings.
So when you say on page 53, for example, all areas are asked to consider the long-term implications of up to a 30% reduction in their net spend over a 4-year period.
Yeah.
When you say all areas, you're talking about, I mean, literally all areas.
Every single service, every single service is asked to consider, and then you can then we can assess it on a risk-based profile. So some areas will not be able to do a 30% reduction because it would be too risky. I do think there is a point where, you know, we're going to have to consider what services the council provides, and certainly there will need to be budget cuts over the next few years. That is undeniable. I think you can all see that from the information we've produced in the budget reports and other things. And like I said, it links back to what are the council's priorities and how do we ensure we achieve the priorities that we've set out.
No, that's helpful. Councillor Carr, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a blue sky question, but it just picks up on the point about looking forward and trying to assess risk and expenditure, etc. Debbie, have you received any indication from central government, now that the local government reorganisation seems to be settled? Have you received any indication that the financial situation might improve for York and North Yorkshire?
I've not had anything from government. We've not had anything, or I've not seen it if it's come in. So
okay.
yeah.
I just wonder, with that question being settled now, with the reorganisation being settled, it might clear the way for more funding being available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Debbie, page 54, business rates and council tax. It talks about the pool, the West Yorkshire business rates pool. Two questions really. One, will local government reorganisation impact on that? And two, I've always been interested in seeing a pros and cons of being part of the business rates pool. Given that you mention in the final paragraph on page 54, the account shows a deficit on council tax and business rates at 31st of March 2021. I'm just wondering what the advantages to York of us being part of that pool as opposed to retaining our own collected business rates.
Well, there's no option for us to retain our own collected business rates. We pay it into the pool or we pay it to central government. Those are the only two options available to us. So we pay it into the pool. So we join a pool, so that otherwise it would just go to central government. But by paying a pool, it retains it in the region, and we get some of that back through the pool. In terms of LGR, Sarah and I were just talking about that the other day, actually, about what that might mean for. I mean, the new council won't be constituted for another 2 years. I wouldn't imagine. So it won't affect. Certainly won't affect 2021, which is the accounts. Obviously, we're in the pool for this year. We'll see how that goes. They're done on an annual basis. Obviously, the risk profile's changed a little bit with COVID and the impact that may or may not have on business rates in the medium to long term. So we're keeping a very close eye on that as a region. So we will be monitoring that. It's too early for us to do that just yet, but we need another couple of months of data really to see what the impact is. But we do look at that carefully, and if the risks were too great, we can just dissolve the pool. So
and who would you can't arbitrarily?
No, you would do it as a collective.
Do it as a collective, yeah.
I mean, it would be a bit of a nuclear option. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily want to do that, but that is an option available to us if all authorities agree.
Right, that's fine. Are there any additional questions? No, there aren't. So just to clarify the process moving forward, Debbie and Emma, this is a draft document. The government have given us this year a further extension, haven't they, to 30th of September, as they did last year, rather than the 31st of July, which is historically how the time period we've had. So what happens here on in? So
Mazars are on with their audit work now. So the draft, and when we come to the work plan later, there'll be an item on for September. I think we've proposed to change the date, haven't we, of the September meeting for the accounts to later on in the month. So Mark they'll be able to maybe give us an update if there is anything on progress with the audit work. But certainly the next thing you will hear is at the September meeting, Mazars will hopefully bring their final opinion on the accounts. But Mark outside can maybe tell us a little bit about that in the next item, or the one after, whenever they're on the agenda.
Yeah.
And it'll be the September one where we will ask to sign them off, and the September one that will have the annual governance statement in it as well.
Okie dokie. Now on page 155, there's reference to the financial guarantees, and this is under the section contingent liabilities. I was a bit perturbed to see that one of the issues were that terms of the guarantee are to be determined at the time they are called upon to ensure compliance with the UK subsidy control regime. No guarantees were given prior to the 31st of March, so it wasn't drawn down. How come we haven't checked whether the guarantees, the contingent liabilities that we've signed up for, and it's not just that one. It's a couple of loans to Make It York, loan facilities to Make It York, that are potentially in breach of the UK subsidy control regime,
well,
or they're not.
No,
has there been any legal advice?
Yeah, oh yeah. I
sought?
mean, Janie might. I don't know. None of us are probably experts on what was used to be state aid, but essentially it depends on how many other payments have been made to that particular company during the year. So that's all it means. The subsidy control regime is about how much you give any organisation within a particular time period.
Right.
I can get a better response on that because, like I say, it's changed because it was state aid and it's just changed since Brexit, I think. So
right.
It's a different, but essentially it'll depend on how much other money we've given them, if any, at the point when the guarantee is called on.
So it would be really useful to know that what full council essentially signed up for is not breaching any, let's call it state aid for the sake of argument.
Well, I mean, it won't be, because if it did, we wouldn't do it. So it won't be. It's just because it's a guarantee. It's a commitment to potentially pay something at a future point in time. So obviously, from an accounting point of view, that's really difficult for us to deal with because we deal with in actuals and facts and figures. This is a potential promise to pay at a point in future, and at the point in future, should that liability materialise, it might not. If it did, at that point, we'd have to make the assessment and judgment on the state subsidy regime.
Okay, lovely, thank you. That's helpful. And unless anybody else has got any additional questions, I've got one final question, which you'll be pleased to hear. Short-term debtors, page 158. The level of debt that's more than 1 year old has increased from 2.79 million to 4.55 million. How much of a risk is that? And two, what percentage of that do you think will ultimately have to be written off? And at what stage would it be written off?
I can't answer that level of detail tonight. I'm afraid I'd have to go in
No
and look
worries.
in the detail. Again, it's potentially just timing differences and due to COVID. Again, as you know, we have agreed payment reprofiles with
I'm guessing that's what it. I'm guessing
but
that's
I'd
what
have
it
to go
was.
in, yeah.
I'm guessing that's what it was, but it would be super useful just to
Sure.
just to have that confirmed, if that's okay. Right. Well, thank you very much. We will revisit this again in September, and when we get to the work plan, there will be discussion as to the date of when we sign off these, when we hopefully sign off these final accounts. So, Emma, I'm not sure if we will need you for any of the other agenda items, but by all means stay if you like, but I'd get some tea if I were you. Right, thank you very much indeed. So we now move to agenda item, and I've completely lost what agenda item we're on now. Is it 6? It's Mazars anyway. Mark, whilst I try to find the right page, can you introduce yourself and explain what this agenda item relates to?
I can indeed. Thank you, Chair. My name's Mark Outside and I'm the Audit Manager for Mazars. And this is a progress update report on the audit for the 31st of March 2021.
Yeah.
So I don't propose to turn the pages on the report and take it as read.
Yeah.
However, it's a good opportunity to provide an update on audit progress for the year ending 31st of March 2021. So per the diagram on page 204 of the pack, we're at the field work stage, and the team are busy testing and looking at the areas outlined in our audit strategy memorandum. Sorry, a 6-year-old just burst into the room.
Is she an accountant?
Not yet. But that's not worth my
I
stride.
thought you were training them young.
Oh dear. Okay, so we've completed our initial review of the draft accounts and we've shared them with management for comment. And as already alluded to, we do plan to complete the audit by September. However, there are always variables that could, like somebody walking into the room, there are always variables that could impact on this. Section 2 of the report provides some useful publications. Again, I'll take them as read. However, I will take the opportunity just to give you an update on the new VFM arrangements that are in place for 2021. So as you already know, the NEO has updated its guidance and auditors will no longer issue a VFM opinion as they've done in the past.
Right.
Much more of a commentary. So we will now produce a commentary within our auditor's annual report, which was previously an annual audit letter. And this has to be completed by the 30th of September each year. However, the government, because of COVID, has given an extension to this. That does mean that if we don't have that value for money commentary finished at the time, and there's no impact on our audit opinion for the financial statements, we can issue that commentary with that annual audit report within 3 months of the date of issuing our audit opinion on the financial statements. Clear as mud.
Yeah.
But in these instances, we would have to be comfortable that anything in regard to the value for money commentary didn't have any impact on our signing of the accounts. So at the moment, that work is underway. We are doing an assessment of risks that we think could potentially be included in this year's assessment. We've sent out a self-assessment for management to complete, which we will inform the work that we look at in this area. So at this stage, it's fair to say that work is ongoing and we are planning to get that done by the September deadline. This concludes the update for today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So the value for money conclusion not being made. I mean, if you recall last year's, it was the qualified value for money statement that was a really significant factor in discussions within this committee. Should such concerns be highlighted in not just this authority, but any authority, how is that going to get reflected? If you're not able to give a qualified value for money assessment, how will issues of concern be flagged up?
So the new arrangements now are supposed to be much more of an iterative process between us and those charged with governance. So right. We would, at an opportunity as soon as we can, we would inform you of any issues that were arising in that area.
As a committee or as an authority?
It would be as an authority via the committee, yes. Via the committee,
yeah. That's useful. So there's no way that A&G can be bypassed? No. That's really helpful. So if there are any other questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. So we're in the fieldwork stage at the moment. There's nothing that you're anticipating that won't allow you to bring your statement to the late September meeting.
Fingers crossed that is the case. There are things where we ask for external confirmations, for example,
pensions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, pensions has been an issue that we've had year in, year out, that has pension valuations that have delayed things, and also valuation of PPE, not personal protective equipment, but plant something and equipment. What's the other P stand for?
Property.
Property, yeah, that's the one. Given that there have been some changes in the way that we're going to be doing those valuations, are you satisfied that York has a robust PPE valuation process, which were highlighted, I think, in the draft accounts?
We're looking at that area at the moment, and we're working with the council just to go through those valuations.
Yeah.
As at the 31st of March valuation date.
Yeah.
And last year we mentioned it was around the challenge management made of the valuer, looking at those assumptions.
Yeah.
And we, from our discussions with the council and management thus far, we have seen evidence that has changed since 1920.
Yeah, well, I hope it would have changed since 1920. But yes, 2019 to 20.
Sorry, yes, financial year 1920.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Mark, as always, it's a pleasure to have you at committee. You always give a very clear explanation of everything. And we shall see you in late September, it will be now.
Yep. Later the better.
Well, it will be the later the better. Yeah, in fact, we're just squeezing under the wire.
That was a cup of tea being offered, so I might go and get it.
Oh, fill your boots. Okay, take care.
Cheers, bye.
Speak soon. So, we're ripping through the agenda today. Agenda item 7. It's amendments to the Constitution by the monitoring officer. Not the big amendments to the Constitution. These are little amendments to the Constitution. But Janie, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you. I don't think I can sort of compete with a 6-year-old, but my neighbours have just arrived with a 10-week-old puppy. So hopefully is now leaving my house. So nearly got invaded. So just to try and add some more highlight to the Constitution, you may recall that during the lockdown and the pandemic, the government issued a number of regulations which required inclusion in our Constitution so that teams such as public protection, public health could act on the additional powers that had been granted that fell out of health protection and the Coronavirus Act. The government ended officially lockdown 19th of July, and therefore some of the regulations which would previously been admitted to our Constitution now need to be removed from our Constitution because they no longer exist. So this is effectively the closure report to note that when we reissue our Constitution, these will be formally removed from it. Obviously, we'll take this to full council as well, just for sake of completeness, but I thought it was wise to bring it for your attention this evening.
Yeah. So they're effectively lapsed or repealed.
Yes, the government, when they issued them, and they put expiry dates on a lot of them, and some of them sort of successively overtook the others as the various steps out of lockdown continued. So it's just a matter of they're no longer in existence, and therefore I need to remove them from the Constitution.
Brilliant. Fantastic. You can't go and play with your puppy yet. Are there any questions on this Constitution amendment? No, I didn't think so. So agenda item 8, which is you again, Janie.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, it's progress update on the PIR action plan that the public participants have discussed, and we discussed at the last meeting and was approved at full council, but an abridged version was approved at full council. So can you give us an update?
So as you know, that it's myself, Debbie, the head of HR and Ian Floyd are working towards delivery against the action plan, which was approved by full council on the 4th of May. And we've committed to bring you, every time you have a meeting, to bring you an update of the progress that is being made. As indicated, Joint Standards Committee and yourself, Chair, and the Vice Chair were involved in those discussions. We're involved in the deliberations around the LGA's Model Code of Conduct, which was issued in May of this year. So we've provided an update. There is work ongoing with the Joint Standards Committee in terms of procedural guidance, which will accompany the model code to make it more understandable. And there is a member development and officer development program that's currently being designed at this moment in time. And once we're in receipt of proposed dates, timeframes, events, etc., we'll be able to circulate those a lot more widely. I just want to raise an issue around the support from the LGA. As you know, you requested, Chair, that I email you following the last meeting when we'd been able to have a conversation with the Chief Operating Officer, because I didn't have the ability to sanction, in his absence, the LGA being commissioned. I emailed you to confirm that he's very happy for the LGA to come on board. We have since met with the regional representative of the LGA, and we have provided all of the documents which are listed in the report so that they could have the fullest information available to them in designing the support which can be offered that can best maximise support to the Audit and Governance Committee, support to ourselves, and support to the Council generally, and also look at the sort of longer term steps around the embedded nature of any outcomes that come out of the action plan. As of today, I'm awaiting the details of the proposal that they put, that the LGA intends to put forward. So we have met with them. They're positive. I think we've clashed with some periods of annual leave, etc. And also they need to sort of locate and identify individuals who may be able to work with the LGA to work with us and support us. So I'm currently still awaiting some timeframes and a support proposal or package, if you like, from them. But they have openly committed to working with us. They've also offered to meet with yourself, Chair, and the Vice Chair outside of this meeting, but offered to meet with you both so that they can hear both directly from yourselves as to your anticipated concept of support that you'd like from the LGA and the type of input that they would like. So I think those arrangements, subject to your willingness to meet with the LGA, are can be made.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Now, this is a chance, members, for you to feed into that process, into that meeting, as to what you would like us to reflect to the LGA, the type of support package that they offer to CYC in ensuring that this is a robust process and that delivers the outcomes that we expect it to deliver. So I shall open it up to questions. Of which, there is one. Councillor Webb.
Wouldn't be right if I didn't say something on this, would it? As Councillor Douglas mentioned earlier on, I mean, so far that we know, this has cost us £152,900, and this is, you know, I've said this before, but I think this is a really important point for as chair to take to the LGA. We have a leader of this council who was in a situation that he's actually failed to declare an interest. Now, this councillor has been a councillor for 20 years. You know, I do think there is a need, and I asked for this last time and it wasn't clear, there is a need for some specific training for that particular member, as that is why we are here. This is not down to the fact that the code of conduct wasn't clear enough. The code of conduct was very clear. It is down to the leader of the council choosing or failing to declare an interest. And so I think for me, I think that's something that really does need to be highlighted, and I'd like, information on what specific training is going to be made for that member, because it is costing us a fortune. It's costing the taxpayer a fortune. And I suppose I've got two sort of questions on the report, if that's okay. On page 220, I'm glad that we have got something in here about the LGA and what they've been provided with, and the fact that they're putting a proposal together. Will that incur the council additional costs? And if so, have we got any sort of ballpark figures? And then on the previous page 219, paragraph 5, there's 2 bullet points that, you know, I'm sure it's great that the Joint Standards Committee have highlighted these 2 things, but I'm really struggling to see what they've got to do with the leader of the council failing to declare an interest in an ex gratia payment. So yeah, that's my issue. And then, you know, actually the action plan afterwards states that nothing has been done yet. Yet that all the rags are green. So that might just be a point to clarify. But yeah, any response on those points would be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I shall hand over to you, Janie.
So the LGA support is free. The council is a member of the local government association, and therefore any support that is offered is free to the council because it's seen as part of that global support mechanism. In terms of the 2 bullet points at paragraph 5, this relates to the code in its entirety. And the Joint Standards Committee are mindful that the code, which was implemented in May, has the London standard of a gift and hospitality, which is classed as £50. And the Joint Standards Committee felt it should be lower for York, so therefore it's £25. And this because the model code will replace in entirety our current code, the Joint Standards Committee took the opportunity to review the entirety of the code, and these are 2 sort of nuances particular for York that the Joint Standards Committee particularly wanted to have amended to the standard model code. So it's not directly at the leader, it's directed at all 47 councillors. So these 2 bullet points are part of the new code going forward.
Thank you. So, I mean, one issue that we seem to be focusing on, Janie, and I'm just developing Councillor Webb's thought, is we seem to be concentrating on the code of conduct as being, and I will come to you, Councillor Carr, sorry, this is more of a supplementary. We seem to be focusing on the code of conduct as being, you know, once rewritten, will be the panacea that will make sure that issues relating to why the PIR was issued, which covered a whole range of issues, will never happen again. Now, when the LGA get involved, and this is, I think, one of the areas that we were so exercised by at the last meeting, is we don't want to see the LGA just come in at the end and say, oh yeah, you've done, yeah, you look to have done everything that you said you were going to do. I would really like to see their expertise, or I think the committee would really like to see their expertise throughout the process, and can we be sure that that will be something that they are putting on the table when they prepare this this proposal, or can we make it very clear that that's what we're looking for? We're not just looking for a peer review at the end.
Yes, so those views have been made clear. And they've also been provided with the link to the previous meeting where you made those views clear as well, so that they can watch and hear for themselves rather than just say from me or Ian or Debbie passing on your message, so they can hear directly your words. I think some of the difficulties that got in putting the proposal together is that they need to identify the people who can help formulate part of that team and availability, etc. So this is not like a standard peer review where you're just required to be available for a week and do some homework reading, and it's quite an intensive week, they're looking for people who can actually have the time to commit and be available over a much longer period of time. So because every peer reviewer who works with the LGA does it on a voluntary basis. So it's been explained that it will take them some time to try and identify the right individuals to support York, because this is not a standard request either. So that's what they've explained, and it has been made clear to them that it's more of an intermittent type of support rather than just something just at the end and they stay silent. So I think hence that's another reason why to meet with yourself and the vice chair as well, just around to offer around that clarity. Just in respect to the model code, not absolutely saying that the model code is the be all and end all around preventing the public interest report from happening again in the future. It is a key cornerstone and part of governance arrangements in going a long way to offering a lot greater clarity on interests. We are currently operating on a 2012 model code of conduct that is vastly out of date, and it is absolutely timely that we adopt the LGA model code of conduct to offer clarity. It's also, if we're asking for the support of the LGA, it's important that we also adopt the documents that they put forward as best practice to supporters. There are other issues that need to be dealt with as well as the model code of conduct, and that's around sort of in recommendation, I think it's 1, is around
the business case,
employment, business cases, etc. And so there's many elements. It just so happens that the work around the model code is being done now more visibly and a lot more direct, because Joint Standards Committee have had recent meetings dedicated to it, whereas the work is still ongoing in terms of other factors. The Constitution is ongoing, and so they're all come. It's not just, I just want to make it clear, it's not just all be all and end all on a model code. For me, it's a much bigger, broader program of activity and program or list or library of documents as well.
Yeah, because I think that's what we want to see in future meetings. How is the business case? What is HR doing? How are they describing voluntary payments opposed to discretion? Has that piece of training been done with officers? So, I'm going to go to. Oh, is that a supplementary?
Can I just respond to some of the comments you've made as well? So in terms of settlement agreements, severance payments, etc., the government is currently consulting actually on severance payments. So there is a public consultation that is being launched by MHCLG that's currently ongoing at the moment. So advice is being sought around the guidance that they issued in the end of May, and also there's now the current consultation as well, which we also have to take into account. So it's a little bit of a fluid platform at the moment. What we're currently doing is just working on the guidance that was issued by MHCLG at the end of May. So currently focusing on that, being mindful it might change dependent on the outcome of government consultation as well. So there is that ongoing at the moment, and there's lawyers in local government are currently indicating that they may, depending on the outcome of the consultation, issue a judicial review. So just dealing with the settlement agreement business case issue at this moment in time is also proving quite complicated for a number of other national factors that are happening at the moment as well. But we are progressing it and seeking external legal opinion on what our appropriate stance should be taking for the here and now.
Okay. Was that a supplementary, Councillor Webb? Because I'm aware Councillor Carr has a question.
I just want to make it clear, I'm really concerned that we're using this replacement model code of conduct, which, Janie, I expect you would have done regardless of this PIR because it needed doing, that it's being used as a bit of a cloak for what the reason for the PIR in the first place. And I mean, I am going to go back briefly to the accounts, for example. On page 77 of the statement of the accounts, it says, and these are the notes about the payouts essentially to remuneration. Note A, the post holder retired on grounds of business efficiency. Now that sentence in itself retired on grounds of business efficiency. This committee highlighted that that doesn't make any sense. It was and it's back in there again. And I just think that if I can say that we appear to be focusing on the wrong thing first. I don't doubt that the model code of conduct should be put in place, and it should have been updated since 2012. But that has not got much to do with the reasons for the PIR. And actually, if we don't go to the really helpful document that you've put at the end, the implementation plan, in terms of completed, yes or no, there is not a single thing on that action plan that has been completed. And I just think we're in I don't want this to be delayed. I don't want it to sort of just drift away. It has to be a quick, sharp process. And I'm worried at this stage.
I would to some extent disagree with that, but I will hand over to Janie.
So it may not look very evident on here, and to be fair, I kind of am living, eating and breathing along with Debbie and with Trudy this implementation plan. However, there is activity ongoing in respect of all aspects of it. I also would like a swift, sharp kind of conclusion of this implementation plan, because what is important for me is how well everything is embedded as a result of this, how well the culture of the organisation responds to this, so that we're never put in a position again. So I'm mindful of dates around the Constitution. There's a provisional date for this committee on the 8th of September, for example. The speed of the Constitution from that point can only go as quickly as this committee believes is right to do, because the Constitution can't go to full council until there's a recommendation from this committee. There's currently external legal advice being sought around the business case, the settlement agreement issues, severance payment issues, etc. Currently also subject to national consultation, which may slightly delay things. And I must admit, I wasn't anticipating a huge amount of national consultation at this time, but there is. The model code, I've already indicated there is work ongoing at the moment to formalise and fix dates for officer and member training. And I take on board your comments. The LGA is willing to meet with the chair and vice chair in terms of overall progress of this plan. They too are very keen on a smart conclusion of this implementation plan, because they also agree that it's the embedding and the change of culture as a result of all of this work, which is absolutely important, about learned behaviour being amended so that the public interest report doesn't happen again. So we need to change the mindset, and that is about, you know, what I've asked for the LGA as well with Debbie is that part of the LGA's work is you come back in X period of time, and you can then help Debbie and I in terms of that assurance of how well is the advice that we give taken down. You know, how can we demonstrate that across the organisation? Also, we've also spoken, I think I've referenced this previously, with Verito as well, to make sure, again, as part of the assurance test for Debbie and I, is that all internal audit reports to being undertaken will also have a view to outcomes of this public interest report. So they will act as a check and balance for us as well, where it's impossible for Debbie and I to know what's going on every minute of the day across the entire organisation. But we are entitled to use the assurance views that can be sought from internal audit just as much as yourselves are, in terms of highlighting to us concerns, highlighting to us where there's embedded practice, either good or bad. And so that is going to help us as well. So I feel that I'm progressing as swiftly as I possibly can with the support of others at this moment in time. But I admit at this is the second report back to yourselves, that it may not look as much as perhaps you were anticipating.
Yeah, thank you, Janie. And just to go back to Councillor Webb's point, I am not disputing for one moment that the conflict of interest element is a really fundamental plank of the PIR. But I equally have as significant a concern about the waste or perceived waste of public money that was paid when it did not necessarily have to be paid. Debbie, I think are you wanting to respond to this before I move on to Councillor Carr? Well, you can put your hand up if it's a supplementary.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to I think Jenny sort of covered part of it, but it was just to make the point that whilst I understand, and recognise some of the frustration, the reason that it's flagged as green, even though it's not been complete, is that we anticipate it will be complete at this stage. If we had concerns about it not being complete, we would flag it as amber. We've no reason at this stage to say that it's not going to be complete. All the work is progressing behind the scenes as we planned. Everything is going ahead. Jane, myself and Trudy are working on this constantly, but we are just people, and so we are working on it, and with everything is going to plan, as it were. Everything is progressing, and we're getting through the work. And I recognise it doesn't, we can't tick anything off yet as being yes done, but it's all going on in the background. So I just want to give that assurance that we're doing the best that we can, really, and we are prioritising it and making sure we get through it.
No, thank you for that, Debbie. Now, the very patient Councillor Carr, and then I've got Councillor Lomas. Oh, you're on mute, David.
Yes, no, thank you, Chair. It was it wasn't performing very well. I'm quite patient. I was absolutely interested in that debate because it's all very relevant. My question is this: aren't there implications for the content and/or clarification of the Code of Conduct and the timing of its adoption from the events that took place at full council week before last?
So we've already circulated the Lord Mayor's views on this matter. The model code of conduct will go back to October's meeting, but it hasn't delayed anything in terms of the supporting procedures, etc., which need to be considered by Joint Standards Committee. So the work is still ongoing. So there is nothing, hopefully, being too delayed. But the model code, hopefully, with all of the refreshed procedures to support it, will go back to full council in October. So we've not stopped time just because of full council. We're actually still progressing with everything, with all our planning.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Janie. But what about clarification on declaration of interest?
The decisions, I think, that relate to what happened at full council in respect of the declarations of interest and the decisions that proceeded thereafter. Is that the point he's trying to make, Councillor Carr, or do you want to elaborate on it?
So,
yes, I'll be happy to elaborate. Sorry, I thought it was pretty obvious, actually, but no, what I was trying to say was that the Code of Conduct seems to have been unclear, let's put it that way, as to how it was applied at last full council.
So we're still working to our existing Code of Conduct. So councillors still need to consider the content of the existing Code of Conduct. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding your question. Relevance to the public interest report implementation plan, but I'm happy to speak to you outside of this meeting if that assists.
Well, if you wish to, Janie, but I just thought that the events at full council the week before last arose out of a lack of clarification of the Code of Conduct. And what were we doing about rectifying that, given that we've got to take it back to full council in October? This gives us a bit of time to revisit it at standards and at A&G and do something about it.
So the Lord Mayor has been very clear on his views about what happened at the last full council meeting. But in terms of declarations of interest, we still are complying with the 2012 code.
I don't think we're going to get much further with this one. I'm going to go to Katie. Councillor Lomas.
Thanks, Michael. And I suspect that Janie was perhaps thinking Councillor Carr was asking a different question than, because I think he was referring to incidents that involved myself and Councillor Mason
Absolutely.
at last full council, not the issue of which items had or hadn't been dealt with at full council,
Absolutely.
which I know there has been a separate discussion about. So I suspect that's where we're just talking slightly at cross purposes. So I don't know if you want to come in on that, and I'll hop back in with my question after.
You're probably going to ask the same question, actually, Katie. That was the whole issue. I thought I'd made it clear, but probably I hadn't. But you proceed. You proceed. You were close.
Mine's on a totally different issue, Councillor Carr. So
yeah, I still don't think. Do you have anything to add, Janie, to what you said earlier?
No, I don't, because I don't think it's relevant to the delivery of the implementation plan for the action plan at this moment in time. Okay. So we have a code of conduct. It's being it is still in force. The 2012 one is still in force.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take us back to the implementation plan. So pages 223 to 226, and I'm just mindful of answers that Janie, you and Debbie both gave about. I appreciate there's a lot of work goes behind each one of these lines to take us to the point of completion, but there are a couple of points that are due for completion by Saturday, 31st of July. So it'd be just useful to know, are we going to hit those deadlines? And then there's a number of others, a significant number of others that are due for completion by the 31st of August. And I think those would be the ones that I personally would appreciate an update on at this point, so that we can have an idea of, are we likely to hit those deadlines? Is there anything going to get in the way of that? You know, we've been hearing all the way through the meeting this evening what an extraordinary time we're existing in at the moment, and we do appreciate that everything can't be done at once and in the blink of an eye, but it would be useful to just have a bit of understanding, because I think Councillor Webb made the point that they've all been given a RAG rating of green, which is fine, but to me, when some of the deadlines are the day after tomorrow, essentially, it would be helpful to have it confirmed. Are those deadlines going to be hit? Are the August deadlines going to be hit? Is there anything that's going to stand in our way?
I think if I can just come in at that point before Janie, I don't think, Janie, we should maybe have reviewed this, because this is an internal working document that but anyway, we'll come to that and improve it for next time. Some of the ones that the deadline is, for example, for Saturday, is about commissioning support, and that has been done actually. So we could have changed some of those to yes, but I have to admit I was reluctant to do that until we actually received the advice. So that's probably as much as me as anything else. But we have done what it says, is we have commissioned the advice in some of them. Obviously, a bit of a curveball with the code of conduct not necessarily getting finally approved at full council. I think to all intents and purposes it probably is, it'll go through at the next one. So they're as complete as they can be. And then I'll leave Janie to answer on some of hers, but certainly for the ones in my area, even if they're not done by bang on the 31st of August, I would hope that they wouldn't be too long afterwards, and would certainly hope that things would be completed by the end of September. So sorry.
So in terms of the standards issues, we are currently working with Hoey Yainstow, and hopefully by the end of this week should have a clearer programme of awareness raising. So that's on mine, it's page 225. So there's the last entry at the bottom of 225. So we're currently ongoing with that, and hopefully we'll have clarity around a time frame and timescales for that by the end of this week. So that's work in progress at this moment in time. The implementation, the Joint Standards Committee have done all of their work, as far as I'm aware at the moment, in terms of they did get the recommendation to full council. They have made the amendments that they've suggested, and it was agreed there. So obviously we didn't preempt what happened at full council, so we probably just do need to change that to rectify that the model code will go to full council in October, now that we've got the Lord Mayor's views. The documents, sorry, I'm just scrolling up in respect of the references for August. So I'm now on page 223. Those are currently all action ongoing and I'm waiting responses for. So that is all sort of being done as far as I am concerned, and it's awaiting next steps as well. So the specialist advice is being commissioned and waiting for receipt of that. Constitution and
well, for example, can I just chip in here, Janie? 1.2, ensure revised business case template as appropriate sign off, and that the head of paid service monitoring off that one. Now, we've been told, and it was before my time, that Audit and Governance signed off the revised business case template. Now, we haven't got a meeting before the 31st of August. So should the dates on something like that be changed?
No, because that's not about bringing it back to committee. That is about making sure that, I mean, maybe need to look at the wording again, don't we, Jenny? Because that was about making sure that officers had appropriate oversight of all exit packages and settlement agreements. So that's an internal document that we would, you know, we've got some central government guidance that we're using. We've commissioned the external support to come up, and that's ongoing. So that will be in place. I don't think it's necessarily for something to come back to A&G because it's an internal business process document. I mean, we will bring it back to show you what it looks like and how it works, what the process is, but that's an internal officer document.
Yeah, the difficulty with the business case at the moment is the government's now consultation on what payments, etc., would be included in that business case. So the government is now consulting on that. So there may be some issues that the government is challenging its own advice on. So we just need to look at that. But this is very much in terms of officer responsibilities and having that appropriate procedure in place. So as Debbie says.
But when the revised, sorry, just to be a bit picky, and maybe you do need to amend the wording, but when the PIR was issued, one of the problems was we were working to an old, out-of-date business case template that wasn't fit for purpose, even though it had been signed off by A&G in 2019. Now, no, that is what was said.
Yeah, I wasn't here for A&G in 2019.
No. I was, but I still don't recall having signed it off. But notwithstanding that, now if there is going to be a revised business case template, then although Debbie's saying it's an internal document, I don't want to find a situation if there is a business case that comes up for further criticism, that the A&G committee get the blame for it because we signed it off.
Go on, sorry, Jenny.
I was just going to say, in my opinion, this is an internal document which the monitoring officer, head of paid service, in the section 151 should be able to use and review and critically challenge. I would not normally put a template document to a committee and ask for approval on a template document, because in my professional opinion, the role of audit and governance is looking at the overall assurance of the process. Has the correct policy been applied? Has the correct decision making been applied? Where's the check and balance, etc., rather than agreeing the kind of internal blank template, if you like, which currently would be the MHCLG proposed template in their May guidance.
Okay.
I think further down on the action plan at 1 point, sorry, I should have my glasses on. 1.4, we would get approval of the revised framework from those range of committees by the end of September, but the framework of how the process works, which, as you know, is the remit of A&G. So it would be for me as the Chief Finance and Section 151 officer to determine what information I felt was appropriate and needed in terms of making those assessments, and then it would be the framework that would come to you by the end of September.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So
it
is in stages. So I'm not going to sit here tonight and say that everything will be done by the 30th of September.
No, that's all I was asking. I mean, that's all I was asking. You know, if it needs to be extended,
as near as possible.
If it needs to be extended, it just needs to be extended. I
we
wasn't
want it
making,
to be right, don't we?
Yeah, I wasn't making a criticism. It was just saying, you know, if you need to amend these dates, amend the dates. Sure. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I realise it's probably not going to hold things up too drastically, but it does concern me that important things like adopting a pay policy, adoption of a local government association code of conduct can be stuck at the end of an agenda and fall foul of the guillotine. Could I suggest that when we have important items like this, they should actually go earlier on in the agenda so we can be absolutely sure that we deal with them at full council and they can be approved in a timely manner so that there's no risk of them for the council falling foul of any legislation again.
So the format of a full council agenda is something that I've inherited, and it's something that's standard to York. So it's not something that I have a gift in. The order of business for the full council agenda is the actual gift of the Lord Mayor. So the Lord Mayor, as you know and you experienced at the last meeting, has the discretion to bring items forward or change the order of the agenda. But that's not my gift, but I can certainly raise your comments with the Lord Mayor.
I think it would be incorporated into the Constitution, Janie.
Well, the Constitution does actually say that the overall
discretion lies
with the Lord Mayor, and which is standard across any council, whether it's the chair or mayor of a council. They always have that discretion and that's afforded to them. But as far as I'm aware, this is a format, a template of an agenda for full council that I've inherited when I arrived. So I think it's a common, long-standing format.
Okay, no, that's fine. Right, if there aren't any further questions, this will come back at the next meeting, but in the next agenda item, it then becomes more relevant as to when that next meeting is. So, without further ado, we will move to agenda.
Just before we move on, I think that this implementation plan that's added at the back is really helpful. And I know there was a mention earlier of tweaking it or changing it. I think leave it as it is and just, you know, updates, no's and yeses. I wouldn't want us to change this as we go along, because then how can we compare 1 week to or 1 month to the next? Thank you. Sorry.
Fine. Right, the next and final agenda item is the work plan, who wants to speak on this one? Debbie or Janie or me or who?
I guess all three of us.
Yeah.
If I go first, then just with the bits for September that are relevant to the financial aspects. So we've, as you know, proposed that we have the main A&G committee on the 29th of September, and that's to facilitate the signing of the final version of the accounts to give our colleagues in Mazars as much time as possible to get through their audit work, so have that as late as possible in September. I would also like to request that the Key Corporate Risks Monitor 2 item is moved to October, and that's because the officer, Sarah, will be on leave that week of the 29th of September. And as it's quite a busy agenda, I would like to request that we move that item to October, please.
Yeah. That for me makes sense. So sorry, Jenny, did you want to add anything?
No.
Good. Well, I just thought polite to ask. Now, colleagues will see that September has got a an additional virtual meeting in it, which is the review of the Constitution. Now, I did say at the beginning of tonight that the next meeting that we had would be a physical meeting. So I just want to clarify with Janie, review of the Constitution, what stage are you anticipating? Is it going to be a review or is it going to be an agreement?
I'm anticipating that will be a review because it is really quite a...
You won't have finished it then?
I have finished it, but I think it's so, given that it took over 4 hours in March 2020 just to dot I's and cross T's on the current Constitution, so immediately before the first lockdown. I'm imagining that after 4 hours, members of the committee might have had enough. And so it may need a secondary meeting. And I'm also conscious that it's not the most exciting topic, 4 hours. But so I'm envisaging that will be the first meeting to start the review of the Constitution. But I might be being a bit cautious.
Yeah, I don't know what colleagues think, but the longer we have, I mean, this is my view, and please disagree with me by all means. But the longer we have this Constitution in draft form or without having agreement or without going to full council, the more difficulties that I envisage us finding ourselves in, whether it be the code of conduct or whether it be the committee structure, not committee structure, scrutiny committee structure, the terms of reference for this committee and all the others. The longer we leave these things hanging, the less we can embed them by the time of the next election. So, Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure I'd understood it right, because I think I'm getting confused now with meetings. Janie, is what you're proposing that we'd have the meeting on the 8th of September, the virtual meeting, look at the review of the Constitution, essentially see how far we get through that? Would that then allow us, if there was further work to be done in between, to kind of sort of get that through at the end of September meeting in time for it to go to full council in October? Or are you looking at a much longer time span and time frame than that? I just want to make sure I've understood what we're kind of...
I'm a bit hesitant to answer actually and commit everybody to something. I'm also a bit hesitant to impact any detriment on the accounts on the 29th of September as well, because I don't know how long that would take. Ideally, it would be a huge wish of mine to take the Constitution to full council in October, and so I would hope that we could use the 8th of September probably as a initial look at it, and then if members are minded, we could then have a physical meeting or something additional, or meet for longer on the 29th of September, which would allow final views on the Constitution to refer it to October. But my only experience of this committee looking at the Constitution is the meeting prior to lockdown in March 2020, which took a very long time to do some very sort of dotting I's and crossing T's changes. So I'm slightly hesitant, Councillor, of not wanting to overcommit this committee and not wanting to undercommit this committee either. There is a potential that we could take the Constitution to December. Obviously, that has an impact on the implementation plan, but it would allow this committee a little bit more time if we needed to focus on the accounts, for example, in...
Well, I have an idea. Now, Councillors Mason and Webb, are your questions relating to this? They are, Councillor Webb. Ashley, does your question relate to the date of this?
No. It's just a general question about that extra meeting.
Right. Can I make a suggestion then, Janie? You say you've done it. would it be possible, given that there are only 7 of us, not 47 of us, to have sight of it at the earliest possible opportunity, as opposed to having it 7 days before the meeting? Because the more time we've got over the summer or during or August to start working through it, to maybe ask you some questions outside of that meeting, the more we can get agreed on the 8th of September. The problem that we have is, you know, when you've got documents that thick, and I suspect it will be that thick, reading it in a week, we either do half a job, which means that we have got to have more meetings, or we don't get it doesn't get the scrutiny that it warrants. So I would ask you whether it's possible for all the members, even though it's a lot of printing, and I do appreciate that it'll be a lot of printing, to be able to get copies of your draft.
So my plan is to circulate it as soon as possible. There's a few issues that I just need to raise with Ian, but he's on leave this week. So my plan is to circulate that as soon as possible.
Councillor Fisher wants it emailed.
I would suggest that it's received electronically, because the amount of paper would be staggering.
Right. Okay.
And
yeah. Well, let's save trees then.
So there are a number. There is a bit of when you review a constitution, it's not something that members should expect to receive 5 days before a meeting, etc. That is wholly unacceptable in my view. I think all members need to receive a copy of it as quickly as possible. There's also various groups of members that also need to have a different conversation with me about it. So, for example, scrutiny chairs need to meet with me about it to look at the proposals around scrutiny. I would imagine that chairs of committees and vice chairs may be interested in having conversations either with myself or with their committee members around terms of references, for example, which I know is something you previously asked to be undertaken.
Yes.
And also respective groups and individual councillors also need to have the time to debate it within either your own political environment or as an independent councillor, consider it and the implications of it, and then have those conversations with me. What we're envisaging on the 8th of September is that reason for it being virtual is that if there is any feedback that wants to come into that meeting, it can either be that is the touching down point that can share your views with it. So, for example, had a meeting with scrutiny chairs this week. They are aware that there's a provisional date in early September and indicated that they may want, as a collection of scrutiny chairs and vice chairs, bring their views directly to the meeting or share them in good time. It's up to them. So you will be kind of a reception point for views, I would imagine, from councillors.
I mean, I'm happy to extend an invite if, rather than have all 9 committee chairs attending the meeting, would it be possible for them to feed back their comments to the chair of CSMC?
Yes, I think that they're discussing that amongst themselves so that you won't get all of them. You'll just get a representation from them. But that, again, that's kind of a group of councillors that I need to meet at some point between now and 8th of September, so that we've got a collective view around certain aspects of the refreshed constitution. And then, you know, I'm also very mindful that political groups need to spend the time of looking at this and take the opportunity to ask me any questions if they wish, or we can clarify things so that we can get as much homework done.
So once you've basically once you've clarified things with Ian Floyd, hopefully next week, and got those agreed or amended, you should be in a position to send it to us by the end of the first week of August, potentially.
I'm hoping so.
Maybe you ought to send it to all 47 members then.
It would be sent to all 47 members anyway. Yes,
Yeah. Right,
but
great.
I prefer to do that electronically, Chair. If that's
Yeah, okay. It's just I prefer,
possible.
I mean, I prefer to work through papers, but I appreciate I'm in a minority and I am not being particularly green there. So so no, I will take the electronic version. Councillor Mason and then Councillor Webb.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Super. I just wondered why we're meeting virtually and then physically and then virtually then physically. I just wondered what the this is the only committee I'm on apart from licensing which hasn't met. So I just wondered what the.
Do you mean as in tonight? Why we're meeting
today's
virtually?
Virtual, then there's another one virtual, and there's two that down has been physical.
Yeah. There's two reasons. I can field this one. Tonight's meeting was because I've just had surgery and I didn't feel physically fit enough to do a meeting down at West Offices or some other venue, and so I did ask if it was okay that as this was a non-decision making committee, whether it would be possible, and the vice chair was involved in those discussions, and so that's why this one was. The one on the 8th, I'm easy. We can either do it physical or virtual. It's neither here nor there, frankly. The one on the 28th, 27th, 28th, 29th, it is a decision-making one. So it does have to be held physically. Last year we couldn't do it because we weren't allowed. And that caused all sorts of complications. So that's why moving forward, I believe that future meetings will all be held physically. Is that useful? Does that help?
Yeah, no, I didn't want to embarrass you tonight. I had no idea that was the reason. And
No, that was the reason, and I'm not embarrassed. I
just think for consistency, I just don't want us to be jumping around if we're moving forward.
No. This was a decision made for my benefit.
I've got no problem with that for you.
Otherwise, Tony would have ended up chairing.
Well, we would have been done in an hour, so I don't know if that was a benefit.
Oh, it's so harsh. Right, you won't get asked again. Councillor Webb.
Cheers. Yeah, I think as long as all 47 members get emailed this as soon as possible, and if in that email it could be made clear that there is a meeting on the 8th of September of the A&G, and if you have any questions, thoughts, comments, feed it into members of that committee. They are these people. I think that'd be really helpful. And I personally would push for a physical meeting on the 8th of September, purely from a practical point of view, as I've only got one laptop screen, and if this is getting emailed to me and stuff like that, this is quite a complex meeting that I need. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to flip between screens, and I might get a physical copy as a member of that committee by then, but yeah, I think it would be quite tricky. So yeah.
Okay, Councillor Fisher.
I don't know if this is possible because I don't know whether our monitoring officer has already completed the entire document, but would it be possible to have the amendments, the changes done in a colour, something like, so we can see what changes have actually been made? Is that possible?
There's very little that bears any relation to the old one, is there?
There is a cross-referencing schedule that comes with it, because the comparator of what has changed is not quite as easy when we did the dotting I's and crossing T's exercise, because it is a fundamentally new structured document under a new framework. So it's not as easy as a compare and contrast. So it's not been as easy to do colour coding. There is a few colour coding marks in it where queries are raised generally of what would York like in terms of this. But if I was to do colour coding throughout the entire document, I think I'd run out of colour or just get too complicated.
Okay.
Right, so it's not a simple thing. We can just colour code small changes or whatever. But okay, we can always refer back to the original because we've got it.
Yeah, there is a cross-referencing schedule that shows you where something is, where it's referenced in the current constitution, where it feature earned compared to how it looks in the new one. So yes, and the cross-referencing schedule will have a column in it so that members can complete their comments, etc. So it's like a work list, if you like, as an aid memoir list, so that it's not just a blank piece of paper. It actively encourages comments per section.
Tony, I'm going to have to ask you just to continue chairing just for a couple of minutes, if that's all right. I will be back.
Right, I'm thrown into the hot seat. Are there any other members got questions on this particular item? Good. Councillor Webb.
I suppose the only thing to say is we've got then in for the September the 8th a review of the Constitution. Is it written in anywhere? Have I missed it? So, for example, we are going to have to physically approve this at some point. So, do we want to just bang that in for like, well, the 20th of October? And put it on the work plan? Is that before full council? Last year it was on Halloween, I remember. So,
oh, I'd have to check.
Full council is the 21st of October.
Oh, perfect. That's going to be great fun 2 nights for us, isn't it? But you know, is that too close?
I think, given the enormity of the Constitution, allowing less than 24 hours notice for full council, potentially yes. So I think you'd be looking at December full council for the Constitution. I'm just really mindful that if there's a lot more work to do as a result of the 8th of September as well, it goes back to groups, back to scrutiny chairs, back to committee chairs. It's about the turnaround time on everybody.
It is, but we're just going, you know, we've been saying this for a year now, haven't we? So I think if we stuck it in, and this would be my suggestion, as an item on the 20th of October, as like giving ourselves a deadline, and then if it goes to December full council, then that's a great Christmas present for us all, isn't it? But I think that even if we get to the 20th of October, I don't think you could do
that, Councillor Webb. I don't think you could do that because you have to give notice of things that are going to full council. You can't just say the day before, this is the final version that's going to go to full council tomorrow.
Yeah, but
so I think that's what Janie was saying.
And so what I've just said is, if we looked at it on the 20th of October, then it didn't come to full council till the December full council, then there would be that time built in. But I think if we don't stick it in now as this is when we're going to try and sign up, even if we get to October and actually that gets slipped, so be it. But if we don't stick it in, it's just going to be like never. Them's my thoughts.
Right. Sorry, I don't know what I've missed, but are we still on the 8th of September? Oh no, we've moved. Oh great. What are we on, Tony?
I think we're just debating whether to put the final review of the Constitution by this committee into the October meeting or not. I mean, it's been established we can't then take it to October full council because there won't be sufficient time between that meeting and full council. But then if we did that and we get agreement on it in October, then we could proceed to push it to the December meeting of full council if we felt that was appropriate. And I think that's probably the target to aim for. It's possible we may not finalise it in October, but I think Councillor Webb is probably right. If we set ourselves a target and aim to have it by that, that's probably not a bad idea. If we slip from that target, we have to push it back. If there's not agreement, if there are too many objections from various other councillors.
Councillor Lomas, before I put that proposal to the vote.
No, I was just going to give that summary.
Ah, rightio. So
we're all agreed while you're out of the room.
That makes life so much easier. So whatever it was that they agreed, I'm happy with. But in October, we are going to be moving the, we do need to take Lorraine's information governance report. So that needs to go into October. What I did want to ask you about, oh sorry, Katie again, Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, Chair, we're saying, what we're saying is we would have the meeting on the 8th of September to do the big talky bit.
Yeah.
Essentially all of the discussion points. That gives a bit of time then through September into October for any last amendments, consultation, to carry on with all the other parties. Then it would come back essentially as a final draft for approval by Audit and Governance in October. So it shouldn't matter.
It's more of a sign off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have done all the discussion. Hopefully we'll have done all the discussions.
Fine.
And that shouldn't prevent us from also dealing with other items on the agenda in October, because we'll have key corporate risk register as well, won't we? Because we're moving that to October, but that shouldn't, I don't think that should pose significant problems. And then it would go to full council in December, unless something dramatic happens in the meantime.
Right, fine. Now, one question I did want to ask about the 29th of September meeting is the Make It York contract management audit, which, as you will all recall, was limited assurance, and all limited assurance internal audits are supposed to come to committee in a timely manner. Are we still happy to have that in September? Because that's the one I was going to shuffle over to October, given that October looked quiet, but is now looking incredibly busy. Tony, Councillor Fisher.
Sorry, that's okay. Either will do. I mean, that could, we've taken the key corporate risk monitor 2 out. Could we put that one in there as a substitute for it? Seems logical.
Yeah. So we'll leave Make It York in September. Right. And then we can play about with it in future meetings, the rest of the work plan, if anything needs changing. Is that okay? It's a movable feast. Right. Well, that's it.
Mike, have you got 2 minutes after the meeting finishes? I'd just like a quick word.
Of course. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me, and thank you to all the officers for their incredibly useful contributions this evening, and thank you for Tony for stepping in while I went for a wee. Right, take care. See you all 8th of September.